Velkommen tilbage til min kanal Xenobu. Den her dokumentarserie er et forsøg på at sætte ord og tanker på nogle af de bekymringer, jeg har, når det kommer til hele den teknologiske udvikling, og mere specifikt den måde teknologiens manipulerende mekanismer tryllebinder os alle sammen. Når vi maksimerer vores online-tid, forstærker det ofte det værste i os.
И у меня оно как налило, и я чувствовала себя членом, сука, эрегированным членом. Знаешь, как оно, блядь, ну?
Well, if you've been wondering where Hey Arnold's been, apparently he's trapped in this person's face. If anyone knows her, keep a plunger or a mini vac in your car in case you run into her and get him out of there. Good lord. Wait till you see this. They call it a selfie-induced coma. Yeah, you don't see this a lot. This is what happens after you've taken your millionth selfie. Apparently, when you reach a certain threshold, your brain shuts off and starts snapping pictures on autopilot. For all we know, this could have gone well into the night. What's going on in this room? This must be the circle jerk wing of the house.
Yeah.
Listen to him.
Yeah.
Yo. This must be the male version of yes.
Yes. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's like some sort of influencer mating call. That's what normal people need. We need to start identifying each other like they do so we can outbreed them and save the planet. There's not a moment that's lived without documenting it for the internet. It's like walking around with a camera drone flying next to you. Why would you want that? Everybody thinks they're Cleopatra all of a sudden. Meanwhile, they're just mimicking what luscious Linda does every weeknight at 3 a.m. on the corner of 5th and Broadway. The only difference is Linda follows everyone back. Wow, great. You did nothing. Any reason you posted this? Hello? Can I help you? I mean, what is the purpose of this? Like, do they mean to post this, or is this an accident? They're not even natural movements. None of this makes any sense. What is this behavior? I mean, they're zooming in on their eyeballs now. They have influencer classes now. How does that work? Okay, class, today we're going to teach you how to be full of yourself. We're going to show you techniques on how to pretend that you're excited about everything you say.
Hey guys, it's Beth here. Hey guys, what's up? It's Lauren.
Hey guys!
What up, everyone? It's your girl, Superwoman.
That's right, folks. The narcissist pandemic is getting worse. Never has so many uninteresting people been so motivated and empowered to capture their mediocrity. Sadly, the virus has spread worldwide with no signs of slowing down. Sure, let's stop traffic while we're at it, too. I mean, is civilization supposed to just come to a halt so you can pretend you're Mary Poppins? Oh, now we're blocking subway doors, too? Should we all wait till you're done doing nothing so the train can leave? See, now you got Casey Jones yelling at you. Hit the road, floozy. I mean, look, you guys are stopping traffic, wrecking hotel rooms. The mail is coming late all the time. You guys are really becoming a burden, you know that? Come on, we're doing this now. I mean, what do these girls think their boyfriends are? Production assistants? Just never enough with these people. You'd think this would be something that only 12-year-olds would do. But no, we're living in a time where there's no difference between a child, a teenager, and an adult. I mean, why do they always do this in the grocery store out of all places? I mean, is that like the new stage, a choice for disgraced children to show off their parents' failures? I don't get it.
Excuse me, ma'am. We won't be having any of that in the store. I'll have my manager escort you out.
Oh my god, I'm so sorry. Not again.
That's right, you tell her, Eugene. Get the f*** out of the store. This one's got some sort of problem. Why is she throwing up like a cat? Then you got this guy. Somehow found a way to stuff a bike seat in his mouth. I'm sure he'd give David Blaine a run for his money. Oh, look, a teepee. Ah, damn it. You just couldn't go 1 minute without being the center of attention, could you? What is the point of what you're doing right now? Do you even know? Can I just look at the damn teepee? Yeah, I know, it's the teepee. You interrupted this to direct my attention to where my attention already was.
Okay, Sophie, ready? Go!
Good. At least someone's fighting back.
Når jeg ser alt det her, så bekymrer det mig ærligt talt. Jeg kan ikke lade være med at spekulere over, hvad alt det her gør ved os mentalt, fysisk og psykisk. Men det er heldigvis ikke alene.
Business model is to keep people engaged, which in other words, this hearing is about persuasive technology. And persuasion is about an invisible asymmetry of power. When I was a kid, I was a magician. And magic teaches you that you can have asymmetric power without the other person realizing it. You can masquerade to have asymmetric power while looking like you have an equal relationship. You say, pick a card, any card, while meanwhile you know exactly how to get that person to pick the card that you want. And essentially what we're experiencing with technology is an increasing asymmetry of power that's been masquerading itself as an equal or contractual relationship where the responsibility is on us. So let's walk through why that's happening. In the race for attention, because there's only so much attention, companies have to get more of it by being more and more aggressive. I call it the race to the bottom of the brainstem. So it starts with techniques like pull to refresh. So you pull to refresh your newsfeed. That operates like a slot machine. It has the same kind of addictive qualities that keep people in Las Vegas hooked to the slot machine. Other examples are removing stopping cues. So if I take the bottom out of this glass and I keep refilling the water or the wine, you won't know when to stop drinking. So that's what happens with infinitely scrolling feeds. We naturally remove the stopping cues, and this is what keeps people scrolling. But the race for attention has to get more and more aggressive. And so it's not enough just to get your behavior and predict what will take your behavior. We have to predict how to keep you hooked in a different way. And so it crawled deeper down the brainstem into our social validation. So that was the introduction of likes and followers. How many followers do I have? And that got it was much cheaper to, instead of getting your attention, to get you addicted to getting attention from other people. And this has created the kind of mass narcissism and mass cultural thing that's happening with young people, especially today. And after 2 decades in decline, the mental health of 10 to 14-year-old girls has actually shot up 170% in the last 8 years. And this has been very characteristically the cause of social media. And in the race for attention, it's not enough just to get people addicted to attention. The race has to migrate to AI, to who can build a better predictive model of your behavior. And so if you give an example of YouTube, so there you are, you're about to hit play on a YouTube video, and you hit play, and then you think you're going to watch this one video, and then you wake up 2 hours later and say, oh my God, what just happened? And the answer is because you had a supercomputer pointed at your brain. And at the moment you hit play, it wakes up an avatar voodoo doll-like version of you inside of a Google server. And that avatar, based on all the clicks and likes and everything you've ever made, those are like your hair clippings and toenail clippings and nail filings that make the avatar look and act more and more like you. So that inside of a Google server, they can simulate more and more possibilities. If I prick you with this video, if I prick you with this video, how long would you stay? And the business model is simply what maximizes watch time. This leads to the kind of algorithmic extremism that you've pointed out. And this is what's caused 70% of YouTube's traffic now to be driven by recommendations, not by human choice, but by the machines. And it's a race between Facebook's voodoo doll, where you flick your finger, can they predict what to show you next, and Google's voodoo doll. And these are abstract metaphors that apply to the whole tech industry, where it's a race between who can better predict your behavior. Facebook has something called loyalty prediction, where they can actually predict to an advertiser when you're about to become disloyal to a brand. So if you're a mother and you take Pampers diapers, they can tell Pampers, hey, this user is about to become disloyal to this brand. So in other words, they can predict things about us that we don't know about our own selves. And that's a new level of asymmetric power. And we have a name for this asymmetric relationship, which is a fiduciary relationship or a duty of care relationship. The same standard we apply to doctors, to priests, to lawyers. Imagine a world in which priests only make their money by selling access to the confession booth to someone else. Except in this case, Facebook listens to 2 billion people's confessions, has a supercomputer next to them, and is calculating and predicting confessions you're going to make before you know you're going to make them. And that's what's causing all this havoc.
De har alle sammen haft en fest på vores bekostning. og de har tryllebundet os alle sammen. Det er stort set umuligt for de fleste af os rigtigt at forstå konceptet af alt det her. Særligt fordi der er tale om processer, som opererer i de skjulte. Processer, som er blevet maskeret og sløret.
There's a tendency to think here that this is just human nature. Now, that's just people are polarized, and this is just playing out. It's a mirror. It's holding up a mirror to society. But what it's really doing is it's an amplifier for the worst parts of us. So in the race to the bottom of the brainstem to get attention, let's take an example like Twitter. It's calculating what is the thing that I can show you that gets the most engagement. And it turns out that outrage, moral outrage, gets the most engagement. So it was found in a study that for every word of moral outrage that you add to a tweet, it increases your retweet rate by 17%. So in other words, the polarization of our society is actually part of the business model. Another example of this is that shorter, briefer things work better in an attention economy than long, complex, nuanced ideas that take a long time to talk about. And so that's why you get 140 characters dominating our social discourse. But reality and the most important topics to us are increasingly complex, while we can say increasingly simple things about them. That automatically creates polarization because you can't say something simple about something complicated and have everybody agree with you. People will, by definition, misinterpret and hate you for it. And then it's never been easier to retweet that and generate a mob that will come after you. And this has created a call-out culture and chilling effects and a whole bunch of other subsequent effects in polarization that are amplified by the fact that these platforms are rewarded to give you the most sensational stuff. One last example of this is on YouTube. Let's say we actually equalize. I know there's people here concerned about equal representation on the left and the right in media. Let's say we get that perfectly right. As recently as just a month ago on YouTube, if you did a map of the top 15 most frequently mentioned verbs or keywords in the recommended videos, they were hates, debunks, obliterates, destroys. In other words, Jordan Peterson destroys social justice warrior in video. So that kind of thing is the background radiation that we're dosing 2 billion people with. And you can hire content moderators in English and start to handle the problem, as Ms. Stamphill said. But the problem is that 2 billion people in hundreds of languages are using these products. How many engineers at YouTube speak the 22 languages of India where there's an election coming up? So that's some context on that.
Der er dog nogle ting, der er kommet frem i lyset til offentligheden. Tilbage i 2014 blev det afsløret, at Facebook havde plantet det, der hedder sublime signaler på forskellige Facebook-brugeres side, uden at de her mennesker vidste, at de var med i et eksperiment, et psykologisk menneskeforsøg. Facebook fandt ud af allerede dengang, at de med sikkerhed kan påvirke Facebook-brugerne følelsesmæssigt via de her sublime signaler og ved hjælp af sprog og ordmanipulation, som vi bliver bombarderet med den dag i dag.
Turn now to a social media story that has been generating a lot of reaction, including anger, over the past few days. It's in response to a study Facebook conducted with hundreds of thousands of its users. The study in question goes back to 2012, when Facebook manipulated the incoming content of pages belonging to almost 700,000 of its users for a week without telling them. It was designed to see how people's attitudes were affected when they read either a stream of more positive posts or more negative ones in their so-called news feeds. The results were published in a respected scientific journal in June. As that information has come to light, many are upset at what Facebook did and how they did it. It's also prompted concerns about the ethics of the research, the journal where it was published, and much more. To fill in some of the details, we're joined now by Reed Albergotti of the Wall Street Journal. Welcome to the program. Reed, first of all, where did the idea for this study come from? What did Facebook hope it was going to accomplish by doing this?
Well, around the time of this study, there was sort of a meme going around the internet that when you go on Facebook and you see all these wonderful things that your friends and family are posting about their lives, you start to feel a little bad about your own life. And there was some research, some academic research at the time that really kind of backed up that theory. And Facebook wanted to find out whether or not that was true. And that's why they embarked on this research project. And they say they've debunked that theory, and they weren't shy about it. They worked with Cornell to publish the study and tell the public what they had found.
Did they raise any questions internally? Is it known about the propriety or the ethics of doing this?
No, and in fact, Cornell issued a statement saying they looked at it and they decided they were not subject to federal guidelines, laws actually, that require informed consent of human research subjects because the study was done by Facebook without the involvement of the Cornell researchers at the time. So Cornell is sort of washing their hands of the ethical implications here.
But what about at Facebook? I mean, do we know if there was discussion about whether they should have let people know ahead of time?
Well, Facebook says that it has an internal review process, but it said at the time it wasn't as rigorous as it is now. And it's one thing that we've been pressing Facebook to tell us more about is, how did that internal review process evolve and what are really the procedures in place now?
So, Reed Albergotti, what are the ethical? I mean, first of all, are there any legal considerations to this, that maybe they violated a law by doing this?
Well, I think right now it's really more of a question of ethics. The laws really apply to government to institutions that receive federal funding, like Cornell University, and not really to private companies. In fact, Facebook isn't the only social media company or tech company that's gathering reams of personal data and using it in these scientific experiments, but Facebook is one that publishes it publicly more than other companies.
So if I mean, set aside any legal question, what about the ethics of it? I mean, what are others saying about what ethical lines might have been crossed here?
Well, look, I've talked to a lot of academic researchers here about this study, and I think really there's a consensus sort of being formed that there needs to be a strong, hard look at the ethics of this. It's a growing trend, really, in the scientific community, private companies, corporations using their data in conjunction with research institutions for scientific studies. And right now, it's really an ethical gray area, and I think researchers would like to see something like another level of informed consent that Facebook would put in front of its users when they enter them into these types of studies. But right now, it's so early, I think we'll have to look at how this backlash shakes out to see if that actually happens.
And just to clarify, give us an example of how the new so-called news feed was manipulated. As we said earlier, they were in some cases making sure they were seeing more positive information, in other cases more negative. I mean, what's an example of how that worked?
Well, there was actually an algorithm, a computer algorithm that had certain words that were associated with positive or negative newsfeed posts. So the algorithm was run totally automatically without any hands-on involvement of the data scientists at Facebook, and that's because they wanted to keep these research subjects totally anonymous. So the algorithm decided which posts were positive and negative and then automatically removed those from the news feeds of those users for about a week. And then after that week was up, some of those posts might have been reintroduced to those news feeds, and the users might have eventually seen them.
I just wanted to read, on our website, we asked some of our visitors what they thought about this. We got comments both positive or at least not so critical, and others. I'm just going to read two quickly. One from someone named Carrie. She said, so read the TOS terms of service and don't sign if you don't agree. That's the point. People don't read terms of service and then they get upset when Facebook does something that the terms allows. And then from another visitor, Scotty, he wrote, the problem is that the terms of service is deliberately so vague that they can basically claim that they do whatever they want at any time. Would you buy a TV from Sony if the manual said that they could, for any reason, decide what programs you could watch on their TV? How typical would you say those reactions are?
Oh, I think they're very typical. We saw similar reactions on our own website in the comment section. And I think what academic researchers are saying is, yes, Facebook has these terms of service that really indemnify them against any legal repercussions, although that may be debated in the future. But there really needs to be, in order for this academic research to be ethical, according to very accepted guidelines, there needs to be another terms of service. Users need to be asked again when they're being entered into a study if they really want to, and they need to be told about the risks. I mean, in this case, the risk could have been if someone was predisposed to depression, that might have triggered some sort of emotional instability. So there are big questions that we need to answer here.
Certainly are. I think a lot of people didn't even realize how much there's just a regular adjustment of what people see on their Facebook pages. But that's a subject for a future conversation. Reed Albergotti, we thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Så Facebook kunne altså manipulere folk følelsesmæssigt, og dermed ændre på deres følelser og deres adfærd i den virkelige verden. Det er da tankevækkende. Jeg forstår simpelthen ikke, hvordan vi er nået hertil, hvor vi mennesker bruger mere tid på at se ned i en skærm, end vi gør på at se hinanden i øjnene. Jeg læste for noget tid siden en dansk artikel, der beskrev, at jordmødrene på fødestuerne i Danmark oplever, at flere og flere kvinder har svært ved at lægge mobilen fra sig, selv på fødestuerne. Så hvordan påvirker det alle de her børn, der fra den allerførste dag, de kommer til verden, bliver mødt af skærmen fra en mobiltelefon?
Early experiences matter. The typical newborn brain is 333 grams. And in the first 2 years of life, it actually triples in size. It's an extraordinary period of brain growth, unparalleled over the life course. And you can see that here. Here is brain growth over the lifespan. And you can see how steep the rise is early on. And it continues to grow until about age 20. And I'll let you guys in the audience find yourselves over on the right there and see why you had such a hard time finding your car keys this morning. Now, we're actually born with a lifetime supply of brain cells or neurons. That's not what actually grows. It's the connections between those brain cells, what we call synapses, that account for that brain growth. And those synapses form based on early experiences. If you will, the mind is fine-tuned to the world that babies inhabit. And to give you an example of that you can all relate to, any child born anywhere in the world can learn to speak any language fluently. But if she isn't exposed to certain sounds early in the first few years of her life, she can learn to speak another language later, but she'll never sound like a native speaker. So a baby born today in mainland China, as amazing as it is, can learn to speak fluent Mandarin. But if she doesn't hear English sounds early in her life, she can learn to speak English later. But as we all know, we know such people, she'll struggle making certain sounds. It wasn't because she wasn't born with that capacity. It was because her early experience didn't condition her mind to learn them. Now, this graphic actually shows just that. What you see is the brain, and you see the neurons and the synapses connecting them. We're born with about 2,500 synapses. By age 3, we have 15,000. And then over time, those connections are actually pruned in response to the external stimulation, the external world that we live in. Now, to give you another example of that, this is the breathing pattern of a one-day-old infant listening to music. And you can see here that he's listening to Mozart, and then Stravinsky is put on, and then Mozart again. Now, I show you this not to present some kind of an infantile critique of classical music, but and those of you in the audience who are classic music aficionados might have a hypothesis about why Stravinsky did this to his breathing pattern. But the point is that even at one day of life, there's a discernible physiological reaction to what babies are actually hearing. Now, we know from decades of research that too little stimulation early on is bad for brain development. I show you here 2 PET scans. Now, PET scans are measures of brain function. The brighter colors show more brain activity. And on the left is a PET scan of a normal kindergartner. And on the right is a PET scan of a child who was raised in a horribly neglected environment. This is actually a PET scan from a child who was raised in a Romanian orphanage and was profoundly neglected early in life. And you'll notice that there are areas of his brain that show no activity at all. It didn't develop as a result of too little stimulation. Now, this is a horrific example of too little stimulation and the untoward consequences of it. But the question we've had in our lab for some time is, what about too much? Is it actually possible to overstimulate the developing brain, or more appropriately, to inappropriately stimulate the developing brain in ways that are actually not beneficial but harmful? And this is important because we're technologizing childhood today in a way that's unprecedented. In 1970, the average age at which children began to watch television regularly was 4 years, like this cute little girl here. And today, based on research that we've done, it's 4 months. It's not just how early they watch, but how much they watch. The typical child before the age of 5 is watching about 4.5 hours of TV a day. That represents as much as 40% of their waking hours. Which brings us to Baby Einstein. Now, many of you probably have not seen Baby Einstein, but I will show you a random 20-second clip from Baby Einstein Day on the Farm, and here it is. In that 20-second clip, there were 7 scene changes, about 1 every 3 seconds. It's about the most exhausting day on the farm since John Steinbeck's Grapes of Wrath. And of course, it's nothing like being on a real farm, right? Adults watching this find it discombobulating because your mind is trying to make a coherent narrative out of this, and there is no coherent narrative. It jumps all over the place. But babies aren't trying to make a coherent narrative out of it. They're not capable of doing that. It's all of that screen change, all of that stimulation that's keeping them actually engaged in the screen. So we've had for a while what we call the overstimulation hypothesis, which is that prolonged exposure to this rapid image change during this critical window of brain development would precondition the mind to expect high levels of input, and that would lead to inattention in later life. So you watch enough Baby Einstein Day on the Farm as a baby, and when you go to a farm as a school-age child, it's boring. It's too slow. How come there's no sheep suddenly popping into my face? How come there's no marionette going back and forth? Why do I have to walk from here to there? That's the general idea, that you're conditioning the mind to that reality, which doesn't actually exist. And we tested this some years ago, and what we found was that the more television children watched before age 3, the more likely they were to actually have attentional problems at school age. Specifically, for each hour that they watched before the age of 3, their chances of having attentional problems was increased by about 10%. So a child who watched 2 hours of TV a day before the age of 3 would be 20% more likely to have attention problems compared to a child who watched none. Now, what else did we find? We found that the more cognitive stimulation children received, and we measured cognitive stimulation in terms of how often parents read to their child, how often they took them to the museum, how often they sang to them, we found that cognitive stimulation reduced the chances of attentional problems later in life. In fact, each hour of cognitive stimulation reduced them by about 30%. So if you will, these are two sides of the same coin. There are certain things that we can do early on in our children's lives that enhance their ability to pay attention, and certain things that we can do early on that actually impede them. Now, if our hypothesis was right, that it's based on the pacing of the programs, and you might imagine that what children watch actually is important. And so content would be key. And I'll give you 2 examples of content to illustrate that point. The first is the Powerpuff Girls movie, the right mix of sugar and spice for a satisfying rush. I don't know how many of you have seen that, but here's a scene from that. Okay, so that was, again, you can see a lot of rapid sequencing. In fact, this was the first movie that was ever rated PG for non-stop frenetic animated action. I'm not making it up, that's the back of the box there. Now, I want to contrast that with something that I'm sure you're all very familiar with. Really needs no introduction, but this is a clip from Mr. Rogers for you to watch.
Oh, hi, Chris. I'm fine. How are you?
Good, thanks. I brought my television neighbor to see what a restaurant was like.
Oh, I'm so glad. Can I show you the table?
Certainly.
I'm awfully busy today. One of the waitresses is ill.
I see.
So I'm sort of doing double duty. How about this?
This is fine. Thank you
Grand.
very much.
Sit down and I'll be right back.
All right. Now, when you come to a restaurant, usually somebody shows you what table you're supposed to sit at. And one of the first things you do is to put your napkin either on your lap or up here. And then, well, this is the way a table is set.
So, Fred Rogers invented reality TV. He's not credited with it. Actually, it's not reality, right? It's even slower paced than reality. The waitress says, "I'm awfully busy," but she doesn't seem the least bit hurried.
Babies this young are extremely responsive to the emotions and the reactivity and the social interaction that they get from the world around them. This is something that we started studying 30, 40 years ago, when people didn't think that infants could engage in social interaction. In the still face experiment, what the mother did was she sits down and she's playing with her baby who's about a year of age.
I'm like a girl. Oh.
And she gives a greeting to the baby gives a greeting back to her.
Yeah.
This baby starts pointing at different places in the world, and the mother's trying to engage her and play with her. They're working to coordinate their emotions and their intentions, what they want to do in the world. And that's really what the baby is used to. And then we ask the mother to not respond to the baby. The baby very quickly picks up on this. And then she uses all of her abilities to try and get the mother back. She smiles at the mother. She points because she's used to the mother looking where she points.
Yeah.
The baby puts both hands up in front of her and says, "What's happening here?" She makes that screechy sound at the mother, like, "Come on, why aren't we doing this?" Even in this 2 minutes, when they don't get the normal reaction, they react with negative emotions, they turn away, they feel the stress of it, they actually may lose control of their posture because of the stress that they're experiencing.
Okay. I'm here. And what are you doing? Oh, yes. Oh, what a big girl.
It's a little like the good, the bad, and the ugly. The good is that normal stuff that goes on, that we all do with our kids. The bad is when something bad happens, but the infant can overcome it. After all, when you stop the still face, the mother and the baby start to play again. The ugly is when you don't give the child any chance to get back to the good. There's no reparation, and they're stuck in that really ugly situation.
So we were watching Lilo and Stitch, and I've seen this movie 100 times, but I've never noticed this. Why does she have a whole bunch of ass and body on her wall?
Ass and body pics. Look right here. Titties.
What the hell? In a children's movie, bro.
Ass. Fucking ass. Ass.
Hi. I had a lot of comments that were asking me to explain my pronouns, and I kept forgetting to answer them. But I'm doing it now. Basically, there's several different entities, ghosts, spirits, whatever, living inside of me at all times, right? And they all use all different pronouns, except for they never use she. And there's a different one that is in charge of everything, in charge of all of my actions every day, a different one is in charge every day. So my preferred pronouns change every day. So I just use all of them at any given time because it's useless to be here's my pronouns for today and they're going to change tomorrow. And when you are referring to me, please only use one of them in the sentence. Don't use multiple different pronouns in the same sentence, because they will get jealous and they don't like to all get referred to at the same time. So try and refrain from using he and they in the same sentence, and use only he or only it or something.
We're gonna need this for this video, just so you know, okay? 1 year, 12 months. This is the statistics. This is what's going to light the fire in your belly. You ready? Listen to the numbers, okay? Australia, an estimated 20,000 children are missing every year. Canada, 45,000. Germany, 100,000. India, 96,000. Jamaica, just under 2,000. Russia, 45,000. Spain, 20,000. United Kingdom, 112,000. United States, 460,000 children are missing a year. Wake up. That's not over 900,000. Just under 1 million children missing yearly.